Hi, it's Barb, Maple PhD, bringing a little more astronomy into your game shelf. Recently, NASA announced that its Parker Solar Probe had touched the sun, which sounds really cool, but I had questions about what does it mean to touch the sun, and why didn't the probe burn up on its way through? So in this case, what they're talking about is that the probe flew through the sun's atmosphere. So the sun is a ball of hot plasma, and there's material constantly flowing off of the surface of it. Really close to the sun, that material is trapped by the sun's magnetic fields and gravity. And that's what the region they're talking about. This is the atmosphere, or what we call the corona. Now, just outside of that, some of the material escapes, and it's never going to return to the sun. This is called the solar wind. And what Parker did was it actually crossed the boundary from the solar wind into the corona and back again. Now, one thing I know is that the corona is actually hotter than the surface of the sun. The surface of the sun, kind of what you would see in a photo of the sun, is at about 5,600 degrees Celsius. The corona, that region with the swirling material that's still bound to the sun and not quite rushing out into the solar system, that region is about 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. That's a huge difference. And one of the things Parker is trying to answer is, why is that corona so much hotter? But my question is, why didn't Parker just burn right up when it went into that corona? Now, the answer to that has to do with two things. One, the density of the material in the corona, and how fast Parker is going. The corona is kind of like hot air. If you think of sticking your hand into a 400-degree oven, if your hand is just in the air, you're actually okay for a while. And the reason for that is that the particles of air aren't very densely packed. Similarly, in the corona, the particles there, they're moving super fast, which is what temperature really measures, but there aren't a whole lot of them. So as the probe goes through it, it hits relatively few of those really fast-moving particles. In addition, though, Parker is really boogieing as it is passing the sun. Its orbit is very elliptical, and it's even done a few flybys of Venus to make it even more elliptical, basically more elongated. And what that does is that when Parker is very close to the sun, that part of the orbit, it is going extremely fast. And in fact, with its last couple passages, it has broken speed records. It has become the fastest human-made object ever while it is in that part of the orbit. So it's not staying in the corona for a super long amount of time, and it's not encountering a lot of particles whenever it does. And that's why it hasn't burned up. What is it learning, though? Now, that is also what intrigues me. So I mentioned there's this boundary between the corona and the solar wind, and one of its goals is to figure out, what happens at that boundary. Also, why is that corona so hot compared to the surface of the sun? We don't know, and so maybe Parker will help us find that out. One thing it has learned is that the corona is not just a giant sphere, but the edges are far more messy than that. When it flew in, it only flew through part of the corona on its way and crossed that boundary fairly quickly. With further passages, it'll spend more and more time in the corona, and maybe we'll learn more about it. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what Parker is going to tell us about as it gets closer and closer to the sun over its next several orbits. The incredible speeds that the Parker Solar Probe reaches as it races around the sun made me think of the game Cubitos. Cubitos is a pool-building dice game where players are racing around a track in order to be the first to cross the finish line. The game is set up by choosing a racetrack and a set of dice abilities. Players each get 2 figures of their color, a player mat, a set of starting dice, and a phase marker, which actually walks them through the different rounds of the game. And then a start player is chosen. They get the start player die, and play is ready to begin. What you do on a round is players first start with any dice in their roll pool and start counting up to their die limit. If they don't have that many in their roll section, they start adding them from their draw area. If their draw area is ever empty, they grab all of their discard pile and put it in their draw area. Once they have their die limit, which starts at 9 but can change with different abilities during the game, they will then roll all of those dice. Any that come up as a non-blank face go into their active area, and players then have the choice of whether or not to roll again. If they don't have 3 active faces yet in their active area, there's no penalty for them rolling again. But once you have 3, you can bust. If you roll and it all comes up blanks, you are done rolling. You lose your active dice into your discard pile, and all of those offending blank dice go back into your roll area, and you move on to the run phase of the game. If you don't bust, you just keep going until you choose to stop, and then you wait for everyone else to finish as well. Once everyone has finished the roll phase, you move on to the run phase. And you start this by, first of all, activating any dice that need it. Some of them have special symbols that you do right away, like acquiring an extra die or losing a die from your pool, that sort of thing. And then you tally up your feat and your credits. You next move around the board using any feat symbols that you have acquired. If you happen to end your movement on a space that has a reward printed on the board, you take that immediately. And then finally you buy new dice. You can buy up to 2, but they have to be different colors. And then, assuming no one has crossed the finish line, the start player moves to the next player and another round begins. Once someone crosses the finish, the game is over. You finish out the round, and if more than one person has crossed the finish, you see who has gone the farthest past the finish. Now, there is a great satisfaction to grabbing this big pile of dice and rolling them. And of course, a great disappointment when they all come up blanks. All of the dice have different abilities, and there are different cards that define different abilities. I think there are up to 7 of them for each die. And this is a race game, so you might think that the only valid strategy is a mad dash to the finish from the time you start the game until the end. But we have found that there is a valid strategy of kind of putzing around the board a little bit to grab some of those rewards along the way, because those can help you beef up your die pool and then make a mad dash to the finish and passing everybody else. And of course, it is that speed element that had me thinking about Parker Solar Probe as it is racing around the sun to help us understand it. So the next time you find yourself playing Cubitos and getting a magnificent turn with lots of feet, take just 1 second to pretend that instead you are racing through the atmosphere of the sun. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions about the game or the science, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. Or maybe this made you think of a different game. I'd love to hear about that too. I'll be back again with another Cosmic Game Connection, but in the meantime you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter as @MeeplePhD. I have a blog at meeplephd.com, and of course, like and subscribe to my channel so you know when other videos come out. So in this case, what they're talking about is that the probe flew through.